Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Unapologetic Conversations. Today, I'm Francis Miranda. I'm going to be your host for today. So today, we have a very, very special guest. We're going to be talking about values today. And our guest, I'm so happy to have him here. So our guest is a personal development coach whose passion is to empower people to live lives of purpose and impact. So to accomplish this, our guest teaches his students from all around the world how to become clear on their foundational values. In fact, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how they can find their mission, how they can find fulfillment through their livelihood. So in addition to his own coaching practice, this guy, imagine this, he also coaches entrepreneurship students on behalf of some of my personal heroes, Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. So let's give a warm, unapologetic welcome to our guest today, Mr. Gregory Mang. Hello, Greg. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm awesome. How are you, Francis?
I'm good. So today we're going to be talking about values. So I'm going to start off our conversation today with a little comment that a cynical little bird whispered to my ear. Okay, and the comment was that in today's world, to have values is actually a liability because values can become a chain for you. And, the context of this is that this person was telling me that the reason why values are a liability is because the people who don't have values don't have any constraints. They can do anything they want without any remorse. So my question is, for a person who espouses values, what do you say about that?
Well, the question I would have in return is, who's more chained? Is it the person who's following their own rules for how they want to live their life, or the person who has no clear definition for their life and is just following the definition of success that everyone else lays out?
Mm-hmm.
This chain that this person's referring to, I think, is an invisible one. We don't realize it. But when we're not clear on what's important to us, when we're not clear on who we want to become and the kind of impact that we want to have and the kind of lives we want to lead, well, then that's when we become susceptible to everyone else's values.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we can become susceptible to everyone else's definitions of success. And I think a lot of the unhappiness that exists in this world is because people are more the leaf in the wind rather than being the wind in their lives. They just get blown away around based on what everyone else thinks and what everyone else's judgment is, and what everyone else's definition, again, of success might be. And when we are really founded and grounded and clear on what we stand for, we plant our flag somewhere and we say, you know what? No, this is what's important to me. This is how I want to frame my life because these are my values. These are the principles that I want to live my life by. Then we come from a place of self-respect and self-confidence and self-esteem. And I understand the perspective of, feeling chained to value, that you feel like you're confined, that you feel like you can't be free. I totally get that. But one of the things I learned a long time ago from a mentor of mine was that discipline equals freedom. And that's a bit of a paradox, I know. But the idea is that when we are more disciplined with how we spend our time, how we invest ourselves, we're a lot more focused, we're a lot more intentional, we're a lot less distracted. The funny thing is we achieve a heck of a lot more. And then that frees up our time to do other things in our life that we truly want to do. But it's by prioritizing our values that we know where to direct our focus and making sure that focus is, again, undistracted. So that way we can live the unapologetic life. We can be true to ourselves, right?
I love it. So you mentioned you mentioned this nice analogy of the leaf being blown in the wind, and I can imagine that currently, maybe out there are many people who feel exactly that way in their lives. That they're a leaf that's blowing in the wind, they're being flung to and fro. And my question for you is, what's your big advice for these people who find themselves in that situation where they feel like they're buffeted by the winds, there's no direction in their life? What advice would you give them?
So it kind of goes back to the idea of being true to you, right? And you can't do that until you figure out the question, who am I? And that might be the most foundational question of all. Is who am I? Like, what do I stand for? Why am I here? What's my purpose in life? And often what I tell people to do is to get clear on your values. Let's first do a guided exploration of where you've been.
Uh-huh.
Because, if you have that belief in your mind, and this is something that's taught by one of my mentors, and I know one of your mentors as well, Tony Robbins, in such a massively powerful belief, is that life happens for us, not to us. And if we have that mentality, we can look at our past with a sense of empowerment. And we look at ourselves and we go, okay, these things happen to me for a reason. They happen for me, not to me. What sort of lessons can I draw from those moments? What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about the world? What did I learn about what I enjoyed and what I don't enjoy? We start to connect the dots. So like when we were kids, I'm not sure if you ever played the game Connect the Dots, but you have that sheet and it's just a whole bunch of dots on the page that are numbered. And if you were like me and you had no artistic skill whatsoever, you were like, what you did is you connected the dots with a pen or pencil, and you just connected them in order. And at the end, you had this beautiful picture of the world and of anything, really. It could have been an animal, it could have been a person, it could have been a vista, right? It didn't matter. But the idea here is that, like, let's start connecting the dots in our own lives. Let's start connecting these dots by going to our past and discovering what are those moments when we achieved great success, and what were the moments when we achieved the worst type of disappointment or pain. What did we draw from those points? What did we draw from those moments in our lives? And then from there, we can start to extract values. We can start to extract beliefs. And from those beliefs, we can start to craft a life curriculum for ourselves, where now we start to identify this is the healing I had to go through in my own life. This is what made me stronger. What did it teach me? What did it tell me that was important in my life? And how can I use those points to start crafting a life for myself in the future that's aligned to that, that's aligned to those values? And then that's a really, really powerful thing. And not too many of us do that. Not too many of us actually take the time to sit down and reflect on what we stand for. And when we start to do that, we can start to answer that question of who am I? And we can start to answer that question of why I'm here. And we can also, and I think this is extremely powerful, is come from a place of forgiveness and self-compassion. I think so many of us are so hard on ourselves for the times that we may not have lived up to our standards in the past.
I'm guilty of that.
So am I. I think everyone is.
If you're guilty of that and you're watching right now, type there me. I'm guilty. There you go. Put it in the chat box. So I like this idea where you said that part of the journey of discovering our values lies in us identifying two particular points in our life. So point number one are the best moments in our life, and the second point is really that area where you feel like you're at your lowest. So I'm curious to know, how does identifying these 2 points open our eyes to what are the values that we need to put into our lives, or the values that we want to stake our lives on?
So these moments that we've been through, either the peaks or the valleys, first off, you can definitely learn things from the glorious moments of your life. They don't necessarily just need to be the painful moments of your life. And I just want to emphasize that. But I think what's really important is that whenever we go through these moments of incredibly intense emotions, like the ones that, again, the most glorious moments are the ones that are just the most painful, we can extract lessons from them. So, for example, if there's something great that happened to you, what did I learn about myself in that moment? What made me feel those feelings? Start to write those down, right? Start to glean some insight. If we want to transform our lives, the first step that we need to take is gaining awareness.
Okay.
And then gaining awareness comes from asking ourselves questions. Generative questions that lead us to answers that we can build upon and that we can take and turn them into actions moving forward. So a generative question is, what kind of lesson did I take from this experience? What kind of belief system did I take from this experience? If something really painful happened to you, so for example, I'll give you an example from my own life. Like way back when I was in grade 5 or grade 6, I got into a schoolyard fight. That's not me at all as a person. And it was an incredibly painful moment for me back when I was a child. But what did I learn about myself in that moment, right? And the lessons I learned from that moment is that I value harmony. I value camaraderie. I don't value competition, right? What I value is friendship. And these are lessons I learned from that. And when we start to take these lessons that we learn from our peak moments and our most painful moments, we start to have those dots on that page, right? And then it's a matter of connecting those dots. What are the common themes that are connecting these dots over this period of time. Because these moments in your life could have happened when you were 5 years old. They could have happened when you were 25 years old. There's a large stretch of time there, but you went through these moments for a reason. Life happened to you for a reason, right? Your life happened for you, not to you. Let's start figuring out, okay, what lessons did I learn? What did the universe try to teach me in these moments? And then find the common themes. Let's start connecting those dots. And what you're going to find is that there's patterns there. There's patterns to what you learn. There's patterns to what's important to you. And when you read those lessons, you're going to feel something. You're going to feel it in your heart. You're going to feel it in your body. And that's a good sign. That means you're on the right track. And if they resonate with you on an emotional level, you're identifying something that's deeply important to you.
So you mentioned earlier in that analogy of the schoolyard fight that incident taught you that harmony is such an essential value in your life, right? So my question for you, because we are talking about living a value-added life, meaning a life that is founded on certain values. So in your case, how did that value of harmony shape the life that you eventually live right now, this life that you're enjoying today? How did being faithful to that idea of harmony become something that you carried with you that ultimately contributed to your success?
Well, harmony was just one of the values, one of the lessons, if you will, that I extracted from that moment. I extracted a whole bunch of other lessons, right? You go through this process over and over again of identifying these peaks and valleys of your life. And ultimately what I discovered is the common link between harmony and a number of other values I had in my life was this idea of humanism, this idea of like humanity, of and I believe it's Keith Ferrazzi who actually uses the term co-elevation or co-creation, the idea of working together to achieve a common cause. And that really, really resonates with me. And harmony is just one aspect of that. So what ends up happening is once you go through this process of identifying the peaks and the valleys, and you start to connect the dots, then you can start to identify themes. And from those themes, you can start to identify what are called intrinsic values or foundational values. These are the things that are most important to you. These are the themes that resonate with you on a deeply emotional level. And once you can identify those, then you can start to apply them to your life. So to answer your question, what I did, and this is what I teach my students as well, is that what you do is you take those foundational values and you turn them into actions. You turn them into actions. But if you want to even go beyond just action, and this is the secret sauce right here, you turn them into habits. You want to turn your values into habits. And the reason why you want to turn them into habits is because you want this to happen automatically. When we start to take the actions that are aligned with how we identify ourselves, which that's what our values are. They're our principles. That's how we identify ourselves. They're the emotional states we want to experience. This is a matter of our self-identity. When we take those actions every single day, that develops an immense level of self-confidence, an immense clarity about who am I, and really good idea of why I'm here. And that's why values are so vitally important, because now I have a framework.
Yeah.
I have a framework for my life. Now I have a framework for making decisions in my life that don't just have to be in regards to career. And that's where I focus. My attention is career and livelihood, but anywhere in your life.
Yeah.
Now you know who I want to surround myself by. Now you know, okay, these are the kind of events and these are the kind of activities I really deeply enjoy. This is the kind of work that would deeply fulfill me. This is the kind of impact I want to have. And it all comes down to like being true to those foundational values. So what you do is you take those values, you turn them into habits, and you track those habits daily. And that's a form of accountability. And you can also gamify it. You can have a lot of fun with it. That's what I do. I track them every day and I try to beat myself. And some days you might get, 80% of your values. You might like, yes, nailed it today. Sometimes you might only get 50. You don't beat yourself up over that. But it's that feedback system that allows you to pivot and adjust your actions accordingly, so you're staying true to your values as often as possible. And over time, by developing these habits, eventually it becomes automatic, where you're just automatically showing up as this person. You're automatically taking the actions that you know are important to you. So many of us, we have things that are important to us, but we don't act on them.
Yeah.
There's something that holds us back. It's like, for example, if you are at a restaurant or let's say a barbecue, and you like, I want to get in shape. and someone offers you, I know no, we're not really at barbecues right now for obvious reasons, but let's just pretend, and someone were to offer you a hamburger, and you shouldn't have that hamburger because like, hey, listen, I want to lose weight, right? But you still take the hamburger. So many people still take the hamburger. And why is that? It's because we need to start attaching, we value this, but we want to start attaching our self-identity to it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like saying, it's like if you were to offer a hamburger to a vegetarian, the vegetarian would say no. Why? Because they're a vegetarian. That's their identity, right? Their values have become part of their identity. They've lived them so much now, it's become a matter of who they are. And if we can live our values every single day as habits and become a matter of our self-identity, that's game-changing. That is game-changing. And that's when you start to make these massive strides. And that's when I started to make massive strides in my own life, was when I developed that system.
Awesome. So we do have a couple of comments. So Rowena C. Santa says hi. Okay. And then we have a Facebook user who cannot be identified right now, but he says, hi guys, looking forward to the replay, got here a little late. And for those of you guys who are watching right now, please share this video. If this video is giving you value, please share it in your links. And at the same time, I'd like to invite you to join the Unapologetics group on Facebook. Connect with me on Instagram at Francis Mir and LinkedIn at Francis Miranda. Now, there is something I do want to bring our conversation to, Greg, which is a very powerful insight for me. It's this statement that the values leads to actions that leads to habits, right? And when we look at our lives, we have good and bad habits, right? And when you look at, for example, our bad habits, take the insight that came to me just by speaking with you about this was that when you look at our bad habits and you trace them backwards, it will actually go and reveal as well our values or the values that we still lack, right? And isn't that like such a mind-blowing thought that when you look at certain habits that you do over and over again, it's not so much as a reflection of the things of the actions that you do repetitively, but it goes back to the fundamental question, what are your values? Because the habits that you're living are simply reflections of the values that you hold. And whether you're conscious or unconscious about them, it's that, right?
Oh, Francis, you nailed it right on the head of the nail right there. You're absolutely right. Values, beliefs, actions, habits, they're all intertwined. You can think of them as being like threads. And when we start to weave them together, they form this tapestry of our lives. And by pulling on one thread, we don't realize that really we're pulling on a whole bunch of threads all at once. And so you're absolutely right. If we have and this is why so many of us feel awful when we have a bad habit we want to break, because we know that it's not true to our values. We know we want to be somebody different, right?
There's a disconnect.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's a disconnect between your value and what you know, how you are. And I think that disconnect is what gives you this uneasy feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And it robs us of our self-confidence, our sense of self-worth, our sense of self-esteem. It's like, why can't I break this habit? I keep doing this thing I don't want to do, but there's clearly you're getting something out of it. Otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got to start to identify, what is that? What is that emotional trigger that's causing me to take part in this habit? What am I getting out of this habit? Why is it making me feel good? And is there a more productive way that I might be able to still get this feeling? And that's why I'm saying, when we take our values and we can turn them into habits, when we take what we want to become, who we want to become, who we need to become in order to achieve our goals, because I think that's a huge question that we don't often ask ourselves, is who deserves it? We're always asking ourselves the question, what do we want? Why do we want it? How do we get it? But who deserves it? Like that's really what it comes down to. And that's why, to go back to your original question about chains, the person who's self-disciplined, who's clear on what they want and goes after what they want, that's not a chain. That's self-empowerment right there. Like that right there is what's going to get them to that nirvana, that happy land, right? But to go back to the idea of habits, like we diminish ourselves every time we engage in a bad habit that we know goes against our values. And so by keeping track of our values, keeping track of our habits rather, then we can create this, as I mentioned before, this feedback system That
Uh-huh.
allows us to then gain awareness. And once we have awareness, then we can start to figure out, okay, what actions can I start to take? How can I make bad habits harder to do? Like, how do I add friction to bad habits? And how do I make good habits frictionless? In other
Mm.
words, how do I add and remove resistance, depending on whether or not I want the habit or I don't want the habit anymore?
So for all of you guys joining in right now, feel free to ask us questions. And one of the questions that I get a lot is, if you are a person who is trying to figure out your values for the very first time, how would you go about it? Like, what would be the starting point? Because we want to give something useful and practical for the people watching this show. So for example, somebody's watching right now, they feel like, okay, I don't know what my fundamental value. I have an instinct of what it is, but I'm not sure about it. So what would be a roadmap that you can give them to help discover, maybe even just for today, just one value in their life? Because maybe you won't be able to answer, what are the top 10 values in my life today, but if you can just figure out what's one important value in your life, that's a victory. So what would be a roadmap for that one value, to discover that one value?
Yeah, values are extremely subjective. I mean, they're the things that are most important to us. They are the principles for how we want to live our lives. They are not just that, but they're also emotional states, how we want to feel. Because ultimately, what is life about? It's about how we want to feel, right? We want to feel good things, and we want to avoid feeling bad things.
Yes.
I value certain emotions. I value certain emotions I want to avoid. And so, definitely going back through that framework that I shared earlier in our little episode here, definitely is a good place to start to do that evaluation of my past, to kind of figure out, okay, what are the beliefs and what are the lessons that I learned? And from there, I can start to figure out what's really important to me from those moments. But also recognizing too, that as I just mentioned, values are emotional states.
Okay.
In other words, that the reason why you want to experience values is because you're getting something from them. You're feeling good about yourself, right? So I would ask people, what are the things that bring them joy in their lives? What are the emotions you want to experience? And I don't mean emotions like something generic like happiness. We all want to feel happiness.
Yes.
But for example, like freedom. Maybe that's an emotion that you want to feel. Emotion can be a freedom. It can be freedom can be an emotion, right? Freedom of like, I like being in control of dictating my own schedule. Or maybe you value something like friendship, or maybe you value competition. Some people might value that. Some people get their kicks from competition.
I know,
But
friends.
the reason I'm suggesting the framework of exploring your past is that it gives you a more step-by-step process to do that, rather than just sitting there and trying to figure it out. Like, oh, what am I? What's really important to me? Now I have a step-by-step plan of like how I can do that. And then from there, I can figure out what's really important to me, and then sit with that and figure out, like, how does that resonate with me? Right? How do I feel about that? Like, the funny thing is that you need a combination of something that's a structured process, while at the same time you need to follow your intuition. You need to follow what's true to hear, right? I can't tell people what their foundational values are, but what I can tell you is a process of how to discover them for yourself, to discover what's truly important to you.
I mean, I like what you mentioned about when you look back at your life, you discover certain things. Like for me, when I look back into my life, I discover that the things that make me happy are when I volunteer to help other people, right? And it led me to conclude that one of my fundamental values, one of my foundational values, is the value of solidarity. And more so, when this pandemic hit, I really felt it even stronger during this pandemic, because I saw how many people here in the United States were suffering, how many people back at home in the Philippines where I live were suffering because of this pandemic. But it also made me realize that we're in this situation where we are right now is because simply people stopped caring about other people. We just wound up being so obsessed about our own individual needs that we failed to look at how can we also help people around us, especially the lost, the least, and the last. And that value actually shaped my past life. The things that I love volunteering for, the causes that I like to support, they were always causes that were connected to solidarity, to helping other people out. Marvin, Agustin, typed in this message. The beautiful message out of this is that we are all capable of changes. We can espouse new and productive values in our lives, which leads me to a question after reading that particular statement, is that can your foundational values change?
Yes, they can. They absolutely can. They do change. And so, if you were to do this same activity 5 years down the road, let's say, you might have experienced something new in your life that has changed the way you look at the world or changed what you prioritize as being important to you. So absolutely, life is all about growth. Life is change, and we have to accept that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't get clear on what we stand for right now. And by doing that, we could start again to build that framework for ourselves that allows us to live that version of ourselves that we want to become, that we know we can become, that's important to us. You talked about solidarity. Like that's such a beautiful, beautiful value. And something I should mention too, while you're going through this process, because I hear solidarity and I think to myself, that sounds so good. I want solidarity to be one of my values too. But it's not about what you want. It's about what's true to you.
Yes.
Right? And so what resonates with you, solidarity is beautiful. I love that. But I might express it in a different way that's more true to me. And it doesn't make my value any better or worse than yours, Francis. It's just what brings true to me, what's emotional to me, what gets me fired up. Right. So when you're starting to define what your values are, don't go into a definition of a textbook or a dictionary and being like, oh, okay, this sounds good. This is what I want to be. Right. No, like it's about discovering your past, honoring that, understanding that happened to you again for a reason. What did you learn from that? Because that's what's important to you. You have to have your own definition of your values, right? You have to be clear on what your values are to you. So for example, for me, I have a value of like seize the day. Seize the day.
Yeah.
And seize the day doesn't necessarily sound like an emotion, but it emotionally resonates with me. And how I define seize the day is I live with intentionality. Every single day, I'm intentional about how I live my life. And that doesn't mean I'm focused on work all the time. It means I go in and I have a clear idea every single day of what do I want to achieve? What do I want to give? How do I want to feel? What do I want to be able to provide the world that one day? So then when my head hits the pillow, I'm like, okay, today is a fulfilled day. And sometimes I nail that and sometimes I don't. I'm human being, right? We all are human beings. It doesn't mean we're always going to hit our foundational values every single day, but we're going to hit them more often than not when we're aware of them. And when we're tracking them through a system of habits, right? So to go back to the idea of like, do values change? Absolutely, they change. You got to continue to keep in touch with them, continue to ask yourself those questions, continue to go through that process of self-discovery and adjust and pivot accordingly. If you might have to adjust your habits over time to stay true to what's most important to you. And that's when we can make that process automatic. That's extremely powerful. Like that like we just to go on as a little bit of a side note here, Francis, is that I'm just really passionate about this. And I really want to share it with your viewers because I think that they're going to get a lot of value from this, is that we look at a lot of our goal achievement of who we want to be, of the kind of impact we want to have. Like we have a vision of that, let's say you're clear on that. But we look at it as being transactional. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to, let's say you want to lose like a little bit of weight. Let's say you want to lose 20 pounds. We're so focused on the goal of losing 20 pounds. And what ends up happening is that those actions are hard. Like it's not easy to do something like that, to stay congruent to what we want to achieve over a long period of time, right? Like to be able to eat the right ways, to be able to exercise all the time, to be able to track all that. Like it starts to wear on our willpower and discipline. And so a lot of us end up running out of willpower and discipline long before we ever achieve our goals, long before we ever achieve our values of what's important to us. So what if we were to reframe that, instead of saying like, this is transactional, I got to put in X amount of effort to getting Y result. What if we invested that effort instead? So instead of looking at it as being, hey, I'm trying to achieve this big goal and I'm using as much willpower as I can until I run out of willpower. What if we instead invested that willpower in habits that supported the achievement of those values, habits that support the achievement of those goals. So that way, eventually what ends up happening is we don't have to rely on discipline or willpower to achieve our goals. It happens automatically, right? Because and so you don't look at it as transactional, you look at it as an investment.
We do have a question, Greg. So we
Sure.
have a question here. So our Facebook user says, let's say you have a goal like earning $1 million per year and you're starting out as a 25-year-old. And let's say that you reach the age of 60 and you do have great habits and values, but you never reach that goal. Does that mean that your value towards money was wrong? So how would you answer this? Very interesting question.
Yeah. And the question I would ask is why? Why? So the money goal is great. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make lots of money. And I think that that's, just as a side note, I think that that's a limiting belief a lot of folks have around money, is that money's a bad thing. Money's the root of all evil. It's not the root of all evil. So congratulations. I just want to congratulate your Facebook watcher first off. Like, hey, you know what? This is what I want. Great. Good on you, man. Good on you. But I would ask you the question, why do you want to make $1 million?
So the name of the viewer is called Noi Noi. Okay.
Noi Noi. Okay.
Yeah, Noi Noi. So I think he has an answer. Oh, that was this is from me, Francis Noi Noi Tan. Okay, so Noi Noi, you have a question right now that you need to answer. So what was the question? Why is $1 million important?
Yeah. So I would want to know why, or not for my sake, but rather for Noi Noi's sake, is to ask themselves the question like, why is making $1 million important to me? What is that going to gain me? What am I going to feel from that? How am I going to be able to use that? And how am I going to be able to feel, how's that going to fulfill me? Right? Like it's not so much about the money. There's something deeper that's there. And like, what's the values that you attach to that money? And maybe those are values that don't necessarily need to be, you don't need to make $1 million to meet those values. Right? And this is why it's so important that you get clear on what you stand for. Because once you get clear on what you stand for, then you have your own criteria for success. You know, like so many of us feel disempowered and we feel disappointed because we measure ourselves based on other people's definitions of success. I need to make X amount of dollars before I feel successful. And I was there. I mean, like when I founded my second company, like for the first few months before I started to take off, it was really rough, lean months. And I was like, I'm running out of money. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, like I'm a failure at this point. But the funny thing is that you have your own definition of what success and failure looks like. But sometimes we forget that.
Yes.
And values remind us of that. You know, values, if you're successful, if you meet your values. So it's not about making $1 million. It's what does that $1 million mean to you? Why is that important to you? Right. And then once you meet that criteria, that's what success means to you. It is not necessarily what's in your bank account. Now, if you do value wealth, there's nothing wrong with that. As I said earlier, that could be a great thing. Right. But it's getting clear first off on what's most important to you and then prioritizing your life accordingly.
So he gave his answer. I'm thinking about things like the pandemic, inflation, travel with the family, financial freedom, and his future retirement. So I think it goes back to what you were saying, that these are the things why the money is important. It goes back to important values like maybe family, a sense of adventure, security for your long-term goals, and there you go. So Greg, wow, I can't believe it. The 30 minutes is now over, right? It's incredible, right? I'm sure a lot of our guests right now would want to also connect with you. So I want to give them the opportunity to know how they can get in touch with you. So how can they get in touch with you, Greg?
Absolutely. So the best way to keep in touch with me is actually through Facebook. So you can visit my Facebook page, just Facebook.com/Gregory Mang, and then Gregory.Mang, I should say. And then I have a group called Driven to Impact. It's a private Facebook community. So feel free to join us there. We actually have a more career-oriented or career-focused look at what's most important to you, including your values. But if that's something that sounds like it'd be right up your alley, we'd love to have you. So feel free to join our group and you can apply there. And then lastly, I realize that I'm a little bit late to the party when it comes to Instagram, but if you would like to connect with me on Instagram, my handle's @Gregory Mang.
Wonderful. So guys, take this opportunity, connect with Greg. If you guys have other questions, you can type it in the chat box when you're watching the replay, and we'll try our best to answer this. So before we go, again, I'd like to invite you guys, if you've not joined yet, join my Unapologetics group at Facebook. My Instagram handle is at Francis Mir, and my LinkedIn is at Francis Miranda. So on behalf of all of us here at the Unapologetic Tribe, we do want to thank you, Greg, for this marvelous time that you spent with us.
Appreciate it.
Truly honored. And as we always say here, we'll see you soon. Bye, guys.